Welcome, everyone, to another postseason edition of the Big Ten Midweek Roundup, which is no longer really the Big Ten Midweek Roundup, Josh. We're talking NCAA tournament. The Hoosiers are still alive, as you all know well. 15 other teams are still alive, 14 of them from a power conference, and that other team is Gonzaga. But you are all very aware of that. What you may not be aware of is how the Hoosiers can beat these Tar Heels coming up this weekend. So Josh and I are going to break that down for you. Do everything else. We're going to talk upsets. We're going to talk our top 3 moments thus far, and we're going to look at other matchups that may or may not concern the Hoosiers going on around the tournament. But first things first, Josh, how are you doing tonight, and how are you doing after that intense weekend of hoops? Have you even recovered?
Yeah, I mean, that was probably one of those fun weekends, I think, of the tournament that I can remember in quite some time. There were upsets, exciting games all over the place. I was bouncing back and forth between that and spring training, but I definitely had my eye on the tournament. That Kentucky game, I don't think I sat down for the last 10 minutes of it. I mean, it was intense basketball. There were some great games, and I can't wait for the Sweet 16. Not any Cinderella teams, but still some great matchups.
Absolutely, and despite the lack of Cinderella teams in the Sweet 16, there was no lack of Cinderella teams or Cinderella stories in the first 2 rounds. You know, say what you will, like I said earlier, 15 of the 16 teams in the Sweet 16 are from Power 5 or Power 6 conferences. That other team is Gonzaga, who, if there is a power team outside of a power conference, it's Gonzaga. But you had your Stephen F. Austins, you had your Middle Tennessees, you had your Yales, who even almost pulled off the biggest miracle, I think, of the whole tournament. Had they pulled out that game against Duke, but they didn't. But even so, no one ever turned that game off. That was never over because right when the second half started, Yale came back in. But we're going to talk all about March later. But first things first, we got to talk Hoosiers. 2 great wins, very impressive win against Chattanooga, and a pound-for-pound 40-minute fight against Kentucky. It was a chess match between Coach Cal and Crean. Crean, obviously, the victor there. A lot of things to take away, a lot of things to look forward to. We're going to focus more on the looking forward aspect of this run for the Hoosiers, and we're going to talk North Carolina. And instead of our traditional 3 keys to the game, Josh and I moved heaven and earth to try and get 4 keys in for this one. So we're each going to do 2. So I'll get going on my first one, and my first one is kind of a hybrid. And for Indiana, they have to knock down the 3 and take away all but the 3. North Carolina defending the 3 is 223rd in the country. I can't remember the percent. I can double-check that if you're curious. Tweet at us. But they're ranked 223rd in opponent 3-point percentage in the country. Obviously, that's terrible. And for a team like Indiana to run up against that, if they can come out firing and hit their 3s, that could mean everything in the world. And they could really blow this game open and take control if they hit 3s early. And often, because they really need to do that if they want to stay in this game, because the big men of North Carolina are going to close down that paint. But also they need to hit the offensive boards and take away the 3. I'm sorry, North Carolina needs to be forced to take 3s. Indiana needs to force them to take 3s, shut down the paint as best they can, because North Carolina can't hit the 3. They shoot 31%, I believe, which is outside the top 300 in the entire country. So, look, if they get hot and out of nowhere for the first time pretty much all year from beyond the arc. They've never been a great jump shooting team, but if they can get hot from beyond the arc, not much you can do there if they're just firing on all cylinders. If you're in the end, you don't shrug your shoulders, you try and change it, but there's not much you can do. But first things first, you've got to stop their play in the paint, force them to take 3s, and then hit 3s of your own on the offensive end. Josh, what's your first key?
Yeah, my 2 keys kind of mesh together a little bit. It's stave off big runs and guard the post, because you just said it. That's where they get most of their points is on the post. So if they're feeding Bryce Johnson on the post, or they're feeding Kennedy Meeks or Justin Jackson or whoever it may be, you've got to be able to stave off those runs. So if Thomas Bryant's getting in foul trouble, you got to get somebody else in there quickly so they don't go on a 10-0 start, and then all of a sudden you're down 8 or you're down 10, and you're like, oh no, what's going on here? Now we're in a pretty big hole. You've got to stave off those runs, because the team like North Carolina didn't, or a number 1 seed for no reason. They are a very good team. They can get you in very quick spurts. It may not be from behind the arc, but they can only get it inside with Bryce Johnson. Marcus Page is a very good driver. Kennedy Meeks inside. They have some pretty guys on the team that the Hoosiers need to combat a little bit. And if Marcus Page, if that happens, then so be it. Indiana just have to figure out a way to shut him down or something like that. But guarding the post kind of ties into this because that's where all their points. Bryce Johnson, he's a big key in this game. He can shoot the ball inside. Most offense is going down low to Bryce Johnson right off the bat. So right as they bring the ball up, they're going to look for Johnson down on the post, and if he's there, he's open. They're going to go to him 9 times out of 10. If you can't guard that, you're going to be in for a pretty big battle, and that's probably not what the Hoosiers want to do, especially with kind of their weaker post game because they're definitely a shooting team.
Absolutely. And on that guard note, that leads perfectly into my second key is don't worry about the matchups. You know, Indiana's seen teams that don't match up well with them all year and vice versa. Purdue, 3 big men to Indiana's pretty much one at Thomas Bryant, who's undersized compared to every last one of them. And who won the game? IU did. And why? Because they shut down the big men because Crean made some coaching adjustments. Guys matched up well, and they had a fantastic defensive game plan. So, you know, after all this heat that Crean's seen and heard from his lack of, you know, coaching on the defensive end of the game, he's done an absolutely sensational job, not just turning the team around, but in that aspect of the game too, getting these guys ready for each team and matching up well. And in March, if you play like a team and your shots fall, you're set up as pretty much as best you can possibly be to win an NCAA tournament game. And Indiana, as far as this year has gone, up to this point, is in a great spot to do that because they matched up well against teams like Purdue, like Kentucky. They've seen Poitras and then Hammonds, Haas, and Swanigan, all these guys that are just like, oh, they're going to give the Hoosiers hell. Thomas Bryant can't hang with that. Well, Crean's like, okay, I'll throw in Bielefeld, I'll throw in OG Anunoby, and these guys step up and they play well on defense and offensively. So if I'm the Hoosiers, I'm not worried about who I'm guarding. Just play team defense like they have all year long with exception to a couple games. Mostly in the Big Ten season, they've played great team defense, play great team offense, get down in transition, score quickly, hit your threes, and they can win this game easily. This matchup is not as scary as the further you look into it. Like I said, get your shots to fall. You know, take away the post play from UNC. Don't worry about your matchup. Just play team defense. And if all of those dominoes fall in line, Indiana will be in a good spot to win this game. Not great because it's still North Carolina, but they will be in a good spot to win this game against the number 1 seed.
Yeah, I mean, this is a game where of the number 1 seeds, this might be one of the best matchups I could have gotten. That doesn't discredit North Carolina, but that's so Indiana as a team is. I feel like they're still a little bit underrated this year, and they're right there. They're a 5 seed, probably should have been a 5 seed, but I'm not going to get into that. But my kind of last key, kind of bouncing off of my last one, is don't commit silly fouls because when you're on the post, you are bound to commit some stupid fouls. You just got to stay there with your hands up and let Bryce Johnson do what he's going to do because he's probably going to score 20 points in this game, and that's just because of the player Bryce Johnson is. But you cannot commit those silly fouls, so then Thomas Bryant has to sit on the bench, and then you're going to have somebody like Bielefeld guard him. I don't think that is that great of a matchup against him. So you're going to find the matchups in this game, and silly fouls are not a good idea because you're going to need Thomas in this game. You need all hands on deck if you're going to be a team like North Carolina, and silly fouls is going to take you out of the game as quickly as it started.
Absolutely, and it all comes down to matchups, even though, like I just said, I may be contradicting myself, the Hoosiers can't think about these matchups. Whatever coach tells you to do, trust in it and give it 110%. Go out there and do what you're told. Make sure your shots fall, create open looks, take away the easy layups and transition points for North Carolina, and you'll be in this game. So, Josh, there's a lot of variables that go into this equation and how the Hoosiers can come out with the victory on the other side. Who's your pick to click and a guy that needs to step up and really, really make his presence known in this 40-minute battle?
Maybe kind of obvious. He had a huge game on Thursday, but OG Anunoby coming off the bench, he has got to be somebody that brings some energy to the game. He's going to bring defense. He shut down Jamal Murray the other day. Probably one of the best defensive performances on him all season. I haven't watched Kentucky all year, but it's probably pretty hard to argue there. Jamal Murray was contained very well. But OG Anunoby in this game, he's going to come off the bench. He could be guarding Bryce Johnson. He could be guarding Kennedy Meeks inside. He can be guarding floor. And he's probably going to put up a good defensive battle against any of them just because that's the player he is. His 7'2" wingspan, he's shown the ability to get to the basket. He's doing those 360 dunks that are always fun to see. But OG Anunoby's got to have a big game if the Hoosiers have any shot in this game because he brings that defense this game that you're probably not going to get a whole lot from Robert Johnson. He's questionable according to Tom Crean. So you just never know with him. But OG Anunoby, you know you have good defense, and you know you're going to get some solid offense from him. It's just how much you can get from him, but I think he's poised for a big game.
Absolutely, and I can't believe what I'm seeing on Twitter before I get into my pick to click. I've seen some guys tweet that, if OG Anunoby from Indiana declares he could be a first-round talent, I'm like, are you crazy? You've seen him for 2 games. This guy hasn't played more than like 20 minutes all season, and yes, he's great, but he's not ready for the NBA. However, his talent will be someday, and what better time to display it than March? So agree with you there. He's going to be an X factor, no doubt about it. But to me, a guy just as important in this one is Nick Zeisloft, because whether or not Robert Johnson can go, Zeisloft is going to be relied upon to make his threes. And like I said earlier, North Carolina is going to give you some open looks. They're going to give you open threes, and their opponents have knocked them down all season. Whether you say, they played Duke twice, whatever. Their opponents have knocked down threes all season. Indiana's knocked down threes all season. They've got sharpshooters. They've got guys that can create their shot from inside the paint, from the free throw line and beyond the arc. So that starts with Nick Zeisloft, and he's been kind of cold lately. So it'd be nice to see him jump out hot and hit a couple shots just for his sake and his confidence, but also given this matchup, because threes need to fall for Indiana. If they don't hit a certain amount of threes, they're not going to win this game. And again, it starts with Zeisloft, and that's the trickle down effect to Farrell and Johnson if he plays, and Bielefeld off the bench, and maybe even Troy Williams if he wants to be crazy again and take a billion and whatever he wants to do. But it starts with Zeisloft, and he's got to hit these threes. He's got to get open, and when he gets open, he's got to not think twice, look straight at the hoop, knock it down, and keep the Hoosiers in this game with the 3-ball, because the looks are going to be there. I can't stress that enough, and I hope the Hoosiers are game planning for that, to take their 3 and play their game. This matchup sets up well for them to play their game and succeed.
Yeah, and Zeisloft on Saturday, whenever he didn't think about a shot and he just went up, he made it, I think, most of the time. But when he thinks about it or takes a dribble or something, it's less likely that it's going to go. And so having confidence with him is huge, and that also brings it over to the defensive side of the floor, because he's kind of filling that Robert Johnson spot where he can lock down maybe North Carolina's second guy if OG Anunoby's in there, because I'm sure Farrell will be on Marcus Page. But if Zeisloft can come in and shut down Joel Berry, who I think he had 19 points against Virginia in the ACC championship. He's another big scorer for them. If he can come in and limit him to 10 points, somewhere around there, I think Indiana is going to be looking pretty good. So that's a good pick right there.
Yeah, and this is a matchup that does set up well for Indiana. I just said that, but don't think that this is going to be a cakewalk. It's still North Carolina. They're still a number 1 seed, and they earned that number 1 seed, no doubt about that. So a lot of things have to go right for the Hoosiers if they want to be in this game to win it at the end. But they can afford a couple things here and there to not go their way, as long as they can make up for those on the defensive end or offensive end, wherever their faults are. Now, there's a lot of anticipation going into this. We still got a couple days to get ready, but those are the things you need to know. But believe it or not, the Hoosiers are not the only team playing this weekend. There are going to be a handful of other games, more than you can count on one hand, which is just such a beautiful thing to think about in here. This is truly the best time of year. Josh and I each have a preview for another Sweet 16 matchup. And, Josh, I'm going to have you go first, just because your matchup obviously will coincide well with Indiana if Indiana wins. So I'll have you go first.
Yeah, my matchup also in the East region in Philadelphia on Friday night is Notre Dame and Wisconsin. Indiana's played both these teams, beaten both these teams, lost Wisconsin on the road, split with them 1-1. But this is a really interesting matchup. Notre Dame comes in 34th in Ken Palm, Wisconsin thirst. Ken Palm has Wisconsin winning by 66-65, with a 52% chance of a win from Wisconsin. So this is setting up to be a very good game. The 6th seed in Notre Dame versus the 7th seed in Wisconsin. You're almost thinking Notre Dame shouldn't even be here, because they got lucky on a tip-in by some guy who barely played before this season, pretty much, in Fugler. But here they are. They're ready to play. But my first key for this one is, where is Nigel Hayes? Is he still on the team? Because he has just kind of disappeared in this tournament. And if they're going to beat a team like Notre Dame and go to the Elite Eight, they're going to need him to step up, especially against a guy like Zach August inside, or Bonzi Colson, or even VJ Beacham, who has really hit his stride for Notre Dame in these first 2 tournament games. So that's my first key. And then my second key is this just luck of the Irish? Is this destiny for Notre Dame? Because they beat a Michigan team where they didn't really play all that well. They beat CNF Austin, where they got a tip in with 1 second left, so that could have gone either way. That was a coin flip. And now they're coming into this game against Wisconsin, basically just playing with house money. But this is a really good Notre Dame team that is capable of potentially making the Elite Eight if they can get by Wisconsin. So is it destiny for Notre Dame, or is this team for real?
Yeah, and destiny is the name of the game when it comes to March, it almost seems like, because a lot of these teams have these moments that tease you, and they're like, oh, maybe this is the team of destiny. They had this tip in, but then you look around the country, and all these other teams are getting these last-second wins. Maybe A&M's the team of destiny because of their inexplicable comeback against Northern Iowa, which actually transitions into my game, which is Texas A&M and Oklahoma. And if I'm Texas A&M right now, I'm sweating through my shorts, my jersey, my shoes, my socks, everything, because Buddy Hield is on a tear right now. It's almost like he's got this chip on his shoulder, and obviously this is not true because he does seem like a very selfless guy and puts the team first, but he's playing like he had this enormous chip on his shoulder and has this just killer's mentality. And once Denzel Valentine's team went out in the first round in upset fashion, disappointing fashion, he was like, all right, I'm going to go prove that I'm the best player in college basketball and that we actually deserve that 1 seed over Michigan State. But, all joking, all seriousness aside, whatever you want to call it, Buddy's on a tear right now, and I can't say that enough. This guy I watched him. I was coming home from spring break on Sunday and watched the second half of that game, knowing he was pretty cold in the first half. And I watched the second half of that game pretty much just following him around the court, and I'm like, this guy can't be stopped. They're throwing double teams on him, and he's still creating shots. They throw a double team, a triple team on him when he drives. He'll find an open guy across the court, get an open look, spark some great ball movement. This team plays great team basketball, and Buddy Hield is a perfect leader. He's averaging over 31 points per game in the tournament. Granted, that's only 2 games, but still just remarkable stuff. That's his 11th 30-point game it was on Sunday, which is unbelievable this season, and 6 rebounds per game. So he's hitting the boards pretty well too. And Oklahoma as a whole in their first 2 games hit 19 three-pointers. 19 three-pointers. And like I said for Indiana, that's just a huge key for everyone in March. If you can hit your threes and just get some points there, if nothing else is going, you're back in the game if you're down, or you're extending your lead if you're up. So knocking down threes is huge. Oklahoma does it very well. And the one issue for them is that Texas A&M hits the offensive boards pretty hard, and Oklahoma gave up 26 offensive boards in their first 2 tournament games. That's not ideal. That's actually far from it. That's not good at all. So the Sooners, rather, almost slipped the Hoosiers there, but the Sooners need to beware and hit the boards on defense. Make sure A&M can't get any second chance points, because Dan Wellhouse will make you pay. He's averaging 21 and almost 6 rebounds per game, 21 points, obviously. And that last game, don't get me wrong, that comeback was epic. It was probably the greatest comeback I've seen in a single game in the sports history at the college level. I've seen some crazy stuff in the NBA, but at the college level, that's probably the first thing that comes to mind. That was absolutely ridiculous. Double digits with well less than a minute left. But at the same time, what are you doing down by almost 15 points with less than a minute to Northern Iowa, who just beat Texas on a half-court prayer? What are you doing? I mean, they didn't look good all game. You and I had a couple of just careless turnovers that won't happen in the Sweet 16 game with a very experienced team like Oklahoma. A&M hit a couple shots that will probably not go in the next 10 times they take them in a game. So pretty much everything went A&M's way the other day, last weekend. And that's not going to happen again. This is March, and in real life, it just doesn't. Nothing happens like that. Things don't happen perfectly in a perfect sequence like that, and just bring up these miracles more than one time in a row. So if I'm A&M, you've got to come out guns a-blazing. I mean, you have to play the best game you've played all year to win this game. Right now, to me, Oklahoma and Kansas are the 2 teams to beat. Not Virginia, not North Carolina, not Oregon. No one except Kansas and Oklahoma. These teams are playing the best basketball right now. I think they'll meet each other in the Final Four. Kansas, I think, has a pretty good route. I think Oklahoma's going to have a tough test against whoever wins that Oregon game. But right now, A&M and Oklahoma, it could be a good matchup. But Buddy Hield is just – I can't explain how great and how talented this guy is. He's on a tear. He will continue to be on a tear. And Oklahoma, I think, will win this game.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good matchups. You got Oregon and Duke, and in the South region, you got Midwest region. Yeah, that's what you got. Syracuse and Gonzaga, 2 double-digit seeds, who maybe didn't even deserve to be here. I mean, Gonzaga had to win their conference championship game, and you got Syracuse, who many thought shouldn't even have gotten in. So you got that matchup, and then I mean, there's a lot of good matchups, and hopefully we can see a Kansas-Oklahoma game, because that was such a good game back in January, 3 overtimes. Buddy Hield going for almost 50 points. I mean, that was a really fun game to watch, and who knows, maybe we'll see that again. But I know there's definitely some more excitement in store in the Sweet 16 and Elite Eight.
Absolutely, and despite the lack of underdogs, like you said, the excitement is it's still there, and that's what's so great about March. But don't get it twisted. We got to go back to this because I know we had a couple things to say. Don't think for a second that just because Syracuse is in the Sweet 16 that we can all say, oh, the committee was right, they deserve to be in. Because they really have not been impressive. Their wins have been big, yes, but they beat an overrated Dayton team who doesn't really have that many weapons. They're just very well coached. And don't get me wrong, their players are still very talented. But this is not the same Dayton team that made a run the other year or even last year and showed up with Jordan Siebert and all those guys. But Dayton's not that great, and they had to beat Middle Tennessee State. I mean, say what you want. They beat Sparty, but Middle Tennessee State is almost a gimme win against these top, these tournament caliber-ish teams pretty much 90 times out of 100. So, while we're on this Cinderella note or this, deserving, there's always going to be controversy with the committee. They have to field 68 teams, but let's push that aside. And Josh, let's give kind of our 3 top favorite moments from the tournament thus far. Do you want to lead off with this, or should I get us going?
I can take this. I'll do my 3. So first of all, kind of ties in right with what you were just saying. You just sometimes you just kind of play who you play, and it's just happened that the ACC has maybe had an easier path than most teams. So like you were saying with Syracuse, they played Middle Tennessee State and Dayton, who probably aren't that great of teams, but hey, you play who you play, and you just keep moving on. Now, that doesn't say maybe they shouldn't be in the tournament or something like that, but, I mean, get 6 teams in, and that's impressive in itself. And in Notre Dame, you played Michigan, who had to play a play-in game. Then you play Stephen F. Austin, who is not a Power 5 or a Power Conference team. You just play who you play, and that's just who you get, and that's why they have 6 teams in the Sweet 16. So that's kind of my first thing from this week. And my second thing is you've got to play 40 minutes. I mean, Northern Iowa, what are you doing? Like I think LeBron said he would have quit basketball if that had happened to him. So I mean, just completely just I don't even have words to describe how that happened. It was just improbable. I mean, things have to go your way, but Mike Jaminski, who was on the call, he was the color guy for that game. He said right Bohan went out of the game, he said this could affect Northern Iowa because he's their main inbounds man. And then you see as they throw away two or three inbounds passes, and Texas A&M ties it up. They go into overtime, and that's how it is. And then my last takeaway from this weekend is sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, because you got Notre Dame, who, I mean, luck of the Irish, I already talked about that. Then you got Northern Iowa, half-court shot. That's not good. That's just straight luck right there. And then you have other teams like Yale, and it's just Cinderella teams getting lucky at a good time, and that's just kind of how it goes. But now, it's now some good teams. I'm not saying those, but I'm just saying now we got power teams that are going to make this Sweet 16 and Elite 8 and Final Four really, really exciting.
Absolutely, and there's not a shortage of top moments that we could possibly do. So that was great work, kind of changing that up a little bit. I'm going to do mine just kind of straightforward and basic, not as creative as Josh on the other end there. But my top 3 moments so far, number one's got to be Middle Tennessee over Michigan State. I mean, Murfreesboro, Tennessee was probably just absolutely berserk after that one. That was a win for the win of the century. That was probably the most puzzling upset in college basketball that I've seen. Florida Gulf Coast, I actually had, and I could see because they had beaten Miami earlier that year. I actually had that in my bracket, so that's not as stunning. Norfolk State over Missouri is probably the next one, and then Lehigh over Duke, CJ McCollum, all those guys. Granted, it is Duke, but Lehigh had some good guys then, and one of them going on to the NBA. But Middle Tennessee over Michigan State was, and they beat them 40 minutes. They never lost the lead. They went up 2-0, I think, 2 or 3-0 and led the whole way. I don't think Michigan State even tied the game. 40 of the 40 minutes, Middle Tennessee was winning in that game. It was absolutely ridiculous. They looked like the better team. And I mean, you can say like they played harder, but they actually looked like the better team. They were making these tough passes. They were cutting. They were hitting the boards. They were outsmarting Michigan State on both sides of the ball. They did it all. That was a joy to watch. I watched almost that entire game with my friends. It was absolutely epic. That's my number one so far. Number two, and this is Central Time, 11:20 to 11:25 p.m. last Friday. And that's giving and taking a minute on each end. So really, this was probably a 2-minute span in reality, but I couldn't really pinpoint the time. I tried to look at my tweets to pinpoint it, but couldn't exactly do it. But 11:20 to 11:25 p.m. Central Time on Friday was the Cincinnati St. Joe's finish and UNI Texas. And my friend and I were going back and forth because with about 2 minutes left, they each were about 10 seconds apart. So we were like, all right, they're both like tie games, 1-point games. We got to keep this going. So first, we saw the UNI Texas half-court shot, lost our minds, went crazy. And then we flipped to the next channel. We can't do any of this post-game stuff because there's another 1-point game going on. And then that Cincy St. Joe's heartbreak, that dunk that got waved off was absolutely crazy. And that's an interesting rule that I think would spark a nice and interesting and intelligent conversation. The ruling on dunks in the final second when the buzzer goes off, what have you. But that could be a long conversation that we'll save for a much later date. But that was epic. And this one's kind of long because there's been some kind of unwarranted and ridiculous kind of side chatter going on about this. And the little guys, for me, have been the number one moment to me of March, whether it's Stephen F. Austin, Yale, Middle Tennessee, what have you. The little guys need to stay in the tournament. Don't change the format. I know this kind of started when Coach K was asked about it in between his first 2 games this season. He said, don't change it. It's perfect the way it is. And if I'm college basketball, I do what Coach K says always. So you got to keep it at there. And I know that there, quiet talk, speculation, whatever, but you can't change this format. It's unique to sports. It's unique to college basketball. And I know, like I said 500 times tonight, that 15 of the 16 major conference teams are from power conference. Or I'm sorry, 15 of the 16 Sweet 16 teams are from major power conference teams or conferences. I can't talk anymore. And that other one's Gonzaga, like I said, who if there is a non-power conference power team, it's Gonzaga. But 64 teams make the official field, and the other few get rewarded for a great year, and they play for a chance, to make that field. Holy Cross was 10-19 going into their conference tournament. They won 5 straight games on the road and on a neutral site, punched their ticket and played Oregon, got in the real field. They won their play-in game. They got into the real field because they earned it. It's all about the little guy in March. And yes, of course, they're never going to win it all. Monmouth was never going to win a national championship. Florida Gulf Coast was never going to win a national championship. Norfolk State, Middle Tennessee, they were never going to win national championships or go to the Final Four. But even when you have these Butlers and these George Masons every 5 years, it's great for the sport because that put Butler on the map. That gave Brad Stevens a job in the NBA. It puts these teams on the map. It's good for the schools. It's good for the whatever. It gives the Steph Currys of the world these potential NBA careers that perhaps may not have happened. And who knows? Steph did make some noise at Davidson in the regular season. But if they didn't make that tournament run, maybe he's not drafted in the first round. Maybe he's not given a chance on one day where he started when the starter should have, whatever. And he's not Steph Curry that dominates the league now. So the little guys, make this tournament what it is. And they make March what it is. And I'm not talking Syracuse in the Sweet 16 as a 10 seed. And I certainly don't mean to have all 1 seeds in the Final Four, which we did have in, I think, 2008, and everyone hated it. It was the least memorable tournament of my life. And everyone will agree on that. It's about the little guys. So to anyone that thinks it should change, you go down to 32 teams or whatever, stop it. It's about the little guys. So my third favorite moment is Stephen F. Austin, Yale, Middle Tennessee, Northern Iowa, all these guys, Hawaii, Little Rock. I could keep going. All of these teams that make noise that otherwise shouldn't. That's what makes March March. I'm tired of hearing this. I'm tired of ranting. I don't want to hear any more of this little guy doesn't deserve it. They earned it. They won their conference. Put them in the field. Keep them there. That's all I got.
No, Michael, I got to give it up for you. That was great. And I agree with you completely because that's exactly what makes this tournament so great is when teams like Stephen F. Austin, teams like Middle Tennessee State and Arkansas Little Rock, they get their one shining moment. I mean, that's what you see at at the end of the whole thing, one shining moment. This is their moment on the big stage, national TV against power teams, and you just gotta play the game because you never know what's going to happen at this time of year, and that's what makes it so exciting. And I want to go back to that 5-minute stretch on Friday night. I mean, that was insane. I had 3 screens going at the same time, so there are 3 games on at the same time. And that is probably the best part of the entire tournament when you got all those games on. Then happening on Sunday night when you had Northern Iowa and A&M, and you had I don't remember the other games, but it's so fun when there's so many games going on at the same time. I was at a spring training game. I was watching games. I mean, it's just wherever you are for this 2-week stretch, you're tuned in, and it's so captivating. This entire thing with these small teams, with the upsets, with just the excitement around this tournament is just fantastic, and that's what makes March Madness what it is, and that's why this is probably one of the best sporting events in the country. And actually, I want to go back to that Indiana-North Carolina game for a minute because I forgot to give those KenPom numbers. So right now, North Carolina ranked 3rd in KenPom right now, so that's a little scary in itself. But KenPom only gives Indiana a 34% chance to win, and has North Carolina winning 82-77. So something to keep your eye on there. So that still a 34% chance to win, but maybe not as high as I probably would have thought, or many of you maybe would have thought.
Yeah, and that's a lot of points. I figure if North Carolina can't hit their threes, which is not expected but very possible, how are they going to get 82 points? I mean, I get it that they're bigger than Indiana and could dominate the post, but how are they going to get to 82 if they can't hit their threes? That'll be interesting. That raises an interesting question. But Josh, I got to end on this. I just can't get over this nonsense about the tournament changing the format. The fact that the people are saying it drives me nuts. I'm going to put you on the spot here. And you can give me 3, 5, 2, 4, whatever you want to give me. What are the most memorable things about March Madness, events, teams, runs, whatever, games, that you can remember in your 18, 19 years on this beautiful green earth? And I'll give you some time to think if you need it. But when I say favorite March Madness moments, go, what are the first 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever you want to do, things that come into your head? Don't even really think about it. Just give me those top moments.
First one has got to be Butler. That was kind of the first Cinderella team that I remember in my head, that Gordon Hayward and the babyface making it all the way to the championship game twice. Or no, maybe Gordon Hayward wasn't there twice, but Butler was there twice, and that was kind of that team that kind of you think about. Another March moment. I mean, I grew up a Washington Huskies fan, so all those games where Quincy Pondexter against Marquette hitting a late shot, not even in the tournament, but Isaiah Thomas in the Pac-10 tournament a couple years ago against Arizona, hitting that cold-blooded shot according to Gus. And if you haven't seen that shot in the call, look it up right now. I'm serious, right now, because it's just a great moment. But I mean, you can go. This could be a whole entire show. I mean, it's just so many great moments in March. But those are kind of 2 that kind of pop into my head. Like Butler with those great rounds, Washington. That was just who watching.
Yeah, and if I had to throw out 3, I'd probably say Florida Gulf Coast in the Sweet 16, just because, Dunk City and, Sherwood Brown, Brett Comer, all those guys. And their school's applications rate actually went up like 60% for the next year. So it actually has an effect on these institutions. This is still a school. It's not a professional franchise. It's a university. They're trying to put their name on the map. So that, I've got to say Butler going there twice with the Matt Howard miracle. That full court foul that he got called on, hit those free throws to win that game against Pitt, I believe. And then obviously Gordon Hayward taking over in that national championship against Duke. That's up there. I remember George Mason in the Final Four. That was epic. And then I think 2012 it was Lehigh won in the first round as a 15 seed, and Norfolk State did it earlier that afternoon. So that was in the same day. Middle Tennessee was sensational. I've never seen such a low seed play like that in my life. I could go on forever, but every single team we named is not Syracuse, Florida, Kansas, North Carolina, Duke, and I only talked about Duke because the team on the other end. Who else? Oklahoma, Virginia, Michigan State, whoever. It's all little guys. This ties into my point. No one remembers, unless you're a fan of a big team, the moment when this one seed beat this team in the round of 16 or 32 or whatever. No, it's the little guys. We remember him forever. We always will. That's the way it is now. That's the way it has been for decades, and that's the way it should always be. So I just wanted to get that out there to kind of conclude my point and silence all this unnecessary chatter.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, they're in the NIT right now. So they lost the other night. So I mean, that's not even that big of a program right now. But it is all about these little teams. They just captivate the entire country. I mean, even like Vermont against Syracuse that was a while back. But I just remember listening to Gus Johnson. This tournament is missing Gus Johnson so badly right now because there have been some great moments for Gus to just explode. But that doesn't mean the guys who are doing it now aren't doing a great job, because they are doing a fantastic job. But I don't know. This is just the best time of the year. I mean, you got baseball coming up, but the March Madness is just fantastic. I don't know. It's just great, honestly.
Yeah. And within the sport of college basketball, March Madness is bigger than any sport. It's bigger than just sports in general. People that haven't watched a basketball game all season are filling out brackets. It captivates the entire country. I mean, we can go on about this, but we don't have the time. We can't express how awesome this time of year is, and how thankful we are we get to talk to you on the eve of the Sweet 16, the weekend going into the Sweet 16, the week going into the weekend of the Sweet 16, because that means the Hoosiers are still alive. They still got a basketball game to play. It will be a tough one, but it's a very manageable matchup in terms of a 1 seed. So look out for that. Obviously, you'll be watching that. We will too. Don't worry about that. Josh, you have any final thoughts?
I said it last weekend it worked. Hopefully we're with next Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday or something that we're talking about going to the Final Four, knock on wood. But I mean, hopefully we're back here next talking to IU wins.
I sure hope so. In case not, it was a great year talking to all you guys, interacting with you on Twitter, and taking your questions in the chat, all that good stuff. But thank you all for listening. We anticipate and hope, knocking on wood, that's what you hear right now, being back next week to talk some Hoosier Final Four basketball. If all the dominoes fall, if they can get by North Carolina, I like their chances against whoever it is they play. But if they do get by North Carolina, let's cheer for Notre Dame, because Indiana has not lost to them this year. And they bring forward a better matchup. But first things first, got to beat the Tar Heels. It's very doable. Tom Crean's got these guys believing. Hoosier Nation's believing. It's a great time to be on campus. If you're near here, just come downtown, walk down Kirkwood. It's alive. People are buzzing about these Hoosiers. They're up to something. They're not done yet. They will play this weekend more than once. I can feel it. Thank you for listening. This was a fun one, and hopefully we will talk to you next week. Go Hoosiers. Beat Carolina. See you guys soon.